Hi everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Build. If you just found this place, then welcome, and if you're returning, I'm glad to have you back. I'm Alex, and this is my channel where we explore and theory craft different character builds for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. And today, we are continuing our quick build series. We'll be exploring a briefly summarized character build for D&D 5e. And as always with our quick builds, if there's ever any builds you'd like to see me explore in the future, be sure to let me know in the comments below. The concept for our build today comes from user Delayed Launch. They requested a spellcaster tank as part of their 3-pronged request from a while back. We had done the Archer Samurai / Heavy Archer, and now we're on to the second build of the 3, which is the Caster Tank. They did say that they love the Bear Totem Barbarian plus Clockwork Soul on a Goliath combo, and for anyone who isn't familiar with that type of build, the general idea is you're using the abilities that the Goliath has, plus the Clockwork Soul Sorcerer's abilities to reduce damage, coupled with the Bear Totem Barbarian's Rage, and you can mitigate quite a lot of damage done to yourself. And now that build is all well and good, especially for damage mitigation on yourself as a caster, but if we're looking at what really makes a caster tank, I'm going to be focusing more on someone who's trying to mitigate damage done to their entire party, not just themselves. In fact, it might mean that we actually end up taking more damage than we should in the efforts to prevent our allies from taking damage. When we're looking at what makes a tank, we need to pick up damage mitigation, but that can come from a variety of different sources. We might want a way to incentivize enemies to attack us instead of our allies, like a sort of taunt type feature. Or we might have some control type abilities to just full on prevent enemies from getting to our allies to attack them. That can be really good for fending off melee enemies specifically. Or we might even just want to take damage for our allies themselves, or have a way to reduce the damage that they do take, thus allowing our allies to go ahead and deal with all the enemies that are in front of us. We're really just going to be acting like a battery or body bag for the rest of our team. Starting the build and character creation, there is actually one specific lineage that we do want, and that is the Kender lineage from the Dragonlance setting. Yes, the Kender, the actual lineage that Tasselhoff from the Dragonlance books is, and the pseudo-halfling equivalent for the Dragonlance world of Krynn. Kender have a very unique ability just in their lineage that can make them excel as a tank. And of course, they are setting specific technically, so that means that you might not actually get to use them, whether if you don't want to use them because you don't want that setting specific lineage, or because your DM says otherwise. If either of those reasons are the case, then that's not a big deal. I would suggest switching out for Goliath, or of course custom lineage or human variant if you do want a free feat. Goliath and their innate damage reduction from Stone's Endurance can help preserve our health pool, so that way we can tank more for our allies and on their behalf. And the free feat we pick up could be Shield Master. I'll talk about why that'll be important later, but just know that those are all good replacements. Kender, though, is the lineage that I am going to assume we're using for the build because I really want the taunt feature that they have. It says that as a bonus action, we can unleash a string of provoking words at a creature within 60 feet of us that can hear and understand us. The target must succeed on a wisdom saving throw, or it has disadvantage on attack rolls against targets other than us until the start of our next turn. The DC for this saving throw is 8, plus our proficiency, plus either our intelligence, wisdom, or charisma we get to choose when we become a Kender. And we can use this bonus action a number of times equal to our proficiency, and we get all uses back on a long rest. A couple of taunts a day in the right clutch situations will really help us actually feel like a tank, because if you're going up against a big boss and you just give that boss enemy disadvantage on all of its attack rolls against everyone else but you, the caster in the back, that could be really potent for us. In terms of what stats we want with our Kender, because we can improve 3 separate ability scores by +1, we're going to get the following array of ability scores. Put 5 points into strength to give us 13. We're then going to put 5 points and a +1 into dexterity to give us 14. The same thing for constitution. 1 point into intelligence to give us 9, 2 points into wisdom to give us 10, and then our last 9 points and our last +1 into charisma to give us 16 charisma. Finally, for background, pretty much anything should be able to work, just because that can be themed however you want. But since we are going for a little bit more of a mechanical build than a thematic build this time, I'll double down on the Dragonlance setting, assume that we either can use it outside of Dragonlance, or maybe we are in an actual Dragonlance campaign, and either way I will say that we're going to be a Mage of High Sorcery. Mage of High Sorcery gives us the Initiate of High Sorcery feat, and this lets us choose one of 3 sort of magic schools, kind of, to basically study from. There's Nuitari, Lunitari, and Solinari. Now they all have their merits, but what we really want is Lunitari for the build. We get to choose 2 spells from Color Spray, Disguise Self, Featherfall, and Longstrider to pick up when we do choose Lunitari as our school, and I'll say we want Color Spray and Featherfall, both ways to mitigate damage. Now that we know what we've got from character creation, and how we've already picked up a couple of damage mitigation abilities from spells and being a Kender, it's time to actually look at our level breakdown. The way I see it, there are 2 main options we could take for our primary class, and then our secondary class is probably going to be the same either way, and we're only really going into 2 classes for this build. We're also going to do a 12-8 split in order to get as many ability score improvements / feats as possible, because we will probably need them. The first option is again going to be Clockwork Soul Sorcerer. I have to admit, it is hard to beat this caster as a tank. They just have so many damage reduction based abilities. They have Restore Balance, which can negate advantage on attack rolls against you or your allies. They have Bastion of Law, which is the go-to damage reduction feature because you spend sorcery points to give out d8s that can then be used to reduce damage against, again, yourself or your allies. And not to mention, they get an expanded spell list that has a bunch of abjuration or transmutation spells, and they can swap out the spells from that expanded list for any other abjuration or transmutation spell in the game. And that includes something like Armor of Agathes, one of the best tank spells because it not only gives you a defensive buff of temporary hit points, but also a retaliate feature if you were to get meleeed while you have those temporary hit points. If you were to cast Armor of Agathes on yourself as an action, you could then taunt as a bonus action, get in melee with an enemy, have really incentivized that enemy to attack you, or else it's going to have disadvantage attacking everyone else. But then even if it does attack you, it's going to take damage from your Armor of Agathes. And you might also have Bastion of Law to then reduce the damage you would even take, potentially giving you more longevity out of those temporary hit points you get as well. It just synergizes so well together. Option 2 introduces a bit more of a control aspect to our tanking idea, or how we're going about tanking. This would be if we were to go Warlock and pick Fathomless Warlock. Warlock itself still gains access to the Armor of Agathes spell, so we're basically neck and neck with the Abjuration Sorcerer for that. But they also get access to Tentacle of the Deep, as well as Invocations. Tentacle of the Deep is a tentacle that we can create within 60 feet of us. It lasts for a minute, doesn't require concentration, and then on later turns we can both move it and attack with it as a bonus action. If it does attack, it has 10 feet reach, which is good enough on its own, but it can also deal damage and slow an enemy by 10 feet on a hit. When paired with the right invocations that buff Eldritch Blast, you could use your tentacle as a bonus action to slow an enemy, and then blast either that enemy or other enemies with Eldritch Blast, and either push them and slow them from the tentacle, or slow them from Eldritch Blast and the tentacle as well, or potentially even pull them with Eldritch Blast and then slow them after that, really incentivizing them to attack you instead of any of your other allies that are around you. Instead of just trying to reduce damage flat out, we're actually controlling enemies, moving them, and slowing them so that they don't even get the chance to attack us or our party members in the first place. Both of those could be good options, and they will pair really well with our multi-class, which is Paladin. For Paladin, we want to go to Paladin 8 to get most of the auras that the Paladin can get, as well as the extra ability score improvement / feat. And even though we are supposed to be a caster tank, we aren't using Paladin for like Divine Smite and the weapon proficiencies, but rather purely for the tanking abilities that they get. The improved hit die, the medium armor proficiency, and the aura of protection, as well as subclass aura depending on which subclass you pick. We also want to make sure that at this point we're throwing on medium armor and grabbing a shield, so we can buff our AC pretty well, but we're not using a weapon, keeping one hand open for our spellcasting. As far as which subclass of Paladin to go, there are again kind of 3 good options. Ancient's Paladin has their aura provide resistance to damage from spells, just flat out. This is changing in the 2024 rules if you were thinking of taking this and then playing it in the later edition, and it'll just give you flat resistance to certain damage types. But if you just care about 2014 rules, Oath of Redemption or Oath of the Crown are also both great options because they both have an aura that lets you physically take damage for your allies. We obviously don't want to be near all of our allies at any given moment, but near 1 or 2 isn't too bad, especially once we hit Paladin 7, because that way we can not only take damage for them, but also protect them with our Aura of Protection. The last few things to mention are the feats. With our feats, we're going to get 5, and we want to dedicate at least 1 for Adept of the White Robes, because that does technically give us an extra damage reduction ability. This one we would want to use sparingly because it costs a spell slot in order to reduce damage by a number of d6 equal to that spell's level. So it's not the greatest damage reduction ability, but it's not terrible. It's also probably better on Sorcerer than Warlock. We then at some point definitely want to pick up Shield Master. The reason we want Shield Master is since we now can wear a shield, we want to use the Shield Master feat to try and mitigate the damage we take when we have to make a dexterity saving throw. We can stack our AC as high as we want, and we can get damage reduction based abilities to use on ourselves as well, but being able to use the Shield Master reaction to pretty much just negate damage we take from a dexterity save, assuming we pass, can really help us preserve our own hit point pool, so that way we can continue to spend our hit points for our team by taking damage for them. The rest of our feats would pretty much just be dedicated to improving charisma and constitution. We could definitely cap our charisma, and we would probably want to mix it in so that we're not just gaining Adept of the White Robes and Shield Master first, but rather bouncing back and forth between those 2 feats and improving our charisma just to help our scaling. And now it's time to summarize the build. The first thing I will say is that the start of this build could change depending on what you want to go with. I would say that if you wanted to have heavy armor proficiency right off the bat, or if you were going to go custom lineage or human variant and you wanted to pick up Shield Master right away, then probably start Paladin for that, since that just makes the most sense. If you were going to go Sorcerer and you wanted proficiency in Constitution saves, probably start Sorcerer. And if you'd rather go Warlock, then honestly, you can just start Warlock if you feel like it. Overall, the build kind of comes online very late in terms of getting all the tanking abilities from being a Paladin, but if you were just focused on getting the actual more caster-oriented abilities that can still let you tank by reducing damage or using control abilities, those both come online very quickly. By Sorcerer 6 and really Warlock 2, we'll have most of what we would want to use in the build. All the other abilities and features that we'll get are just icing on the cake. I think it is probably a little obvious that a lot of our abilities are very situational, because most tank abilities in D&D are. Our taunt ability, that's like our main tank ability that we got from Kender, only affects enemies that are wanting to attack us. It doesn't affect spells or saving throws or anything like that. Because we are grabbing a bunch of different damage mitigation abilities, whether that's damage reduction, control, just spells in general to boost our defenses, or of course the Paladin auras to let us take damage for our allies, that all combined together can really go from having some situational tanking abilities to having a tank ability for any situation. We just want to show up, be the battery for our team, and just keep our allies alive while either reducing damage or taking damage on their behalf. Any way that we can mitigate the damage they take and maybe deal some damage back ourselves is really going to make us feel like a full tank character, even though for the most part we are predominantly a spellcaster. Other than that, let me know what you thought of the build or what you would add or change to get closer to the idea of the caster tank, or whether or not you would rather just play a caster that's all about reducing damage as much as possible to themselves. Thank you so much for coming on the journey with me, and I hope to see you in the next one.